In the summer of 1587, 115 English colonists vanished without a trace from a small settlement on the coast of what we now call North Carolina. No bodies were ever found. No evidence of violence was discovered. They simply disappeared, leaving behind only a single word carved into a wooden post: Croatoan. This is the story of the lost colony of Roanoke, America's oldest unsolved mystery. For more than 4 centuries, historians, archaeologists, and investigators have searched for answers. What happened to John White's daughter, Eleanor, and her newborn child, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas? Where did an entire community of men, women, and children disappear to on a barrier island with nowhere to hide? Recent archaeological discoveries have uncovered startling new evidence. DNA analysis has revealed unexpected connections. Ground-penetrating radar has detected anomalies that challenge everything we thought we knew. Tonight, we piece together the most comprehensive investigation ever attempted into one of history's greatest mysteries. Before we begin this journey into the past, make sure you're subscribed. We investigate history's most perplexing mysteries every month, and this story will take you places you never expected. This is not just about a missing colony, it's about survival, betrayal, and secrets that have remained buried for over 400 years. The year was 1583 when Sir Walter Raleigh first conceived his grand vision for English colonization of the New World. Queen Elizabeth I had granted him a royal charter to establish settlements in what the English called Virginia, named in honor of the Virgin Queen herself. But Raleigh's ambitions extended far beyond simple exploration. Royal documents from the period reveal that Raleigh's charter granted him extraordinary powers. He could govern territories, establish laws, and most importantly for this story, he had the authority to relocate populations as he saw fit. The charter specifically mentioned the possibility of moving undesirable elements from English society to the colonies. Raleigh's first attempt at colonization in 1585 had been a disaster. Ralph Lane's military expedition to Roanoke Island had ended in conflict with local Native American tribes and an emergency evacuation by Sir Francis Drake. But rather than abandon his dreams, Raleigh began planning something far more ambitious and far more secretive. The passenger manifests for the 1587 voyage reveal fascinating details about who was selected for this second attempt. Unlike the military expedition of 1585, this group consisted primarily of families: 17 women, 11 children, and 87 men. But colonial recruitment records suggest that many of these families had not volunteered for the journey. Court records from Essex and Kent counties show that several families listed on the Roanoke Manifest had been facing eviction for debt. Others had been involved in religious disputes or minor legal troubles. Some historians now believe that Raleigh's second colony was designed not just as a settlement, but as a solution to England's growing problem with displaced populations. At the center of this mystery stands John White, artist, cartographer, and reluctant governor of the Roanoke Col. Only White had participated in the failed 1585 expedition as an illustrator, creating detailed drawings of Native American life and the coastal geography. His artistic talents made him an obvious choice to document the new colony, but records suggest he was selected for more than his artistic abilities. White's surviving papers, held in the British Museum, reveal a man obsessed with precision and planning. His maps of the Outer Banks are extraordinarily detailed, showing not just coastal features but inland waterways, forest paths, and Native American settlements. Most intriguingly, his personal correspondence mentions contingency routes and alternative harbors, language that suggests the colonists were prepared for the possibility of relocating. A letter dated May 15, 1587 from White to Raleigh discusses what White calls the secondary plan. The letter, discovered in Raleigh's estate papers in 1923, mentions provisions for relocation to friendly territories and integration protocols. These phrases have puzzled historians for decades. What kind of integration was White referring to? Personal tragedy would soon complicate White's careful planning. His daughter Eleanor Dare was pregnant when they departed England, and she gave birth to Virginia Dare on August 18, 1587, just 1 month after their arrival on Roanoke Island. Virginia was the first English child born in the Americas, but her birth created an unexpected complication. White's journal entries from this period reveal growing anxiety about the colony's vulnerability. Supply ships from England were overdue, relations with local tribes were tense, and the colonists were unprepared for the approaching winter. Most concerning of all, White writes about strangers observing our settlement and signals seen from the mainland at night. On August 27, 1587, just 9 days after Virginia Dare's birth, John White made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Despite his desperate wish to remain with his family, the colonists convinced him to return to England for supplies. The colony was running dangerously low on food, medicine, and ammunition. White's departure journal contains a crucial entry that has received little attention from historians. He records that the colonists agreed upon a sign should circumstances require their departure. They would carve the name of their destination upon a tree or post, and if they left under duress or threat, they would add a cross above the name. The journal goes on to detail 3 pre-arranged locations where the colonists might relocate: Croatoan Island to the south, the Chesapeake Bay region to the north, or inland territories controlled by the friendly Roanoke tribe. Each location had been scouted during the 1585 expedition and deemed suitable for temporary refuge. But White's return to England coincided with one of the most dangerous periods in English history. The Spanish Armada was assembling for its assault on England, and every available ship was pressed into military service. White found himself trapped in a country preparing for invasion, unable to secure passage back to his family. For 3 agonizing years, White petitioned investors, appealed to the Crown, and begged ship captains for passage to Roanoke. His letters from this period, preserved in the Harclete Society archives, reveal a man consumed by guilt and desperation. He describes nightmares about his daughter and granddaughter, and a growing certainty that something terrible had befallen the colony. Finally, on March 20, 1590, White secured passage on a privateering expedition bound for the Caribbean. The ship's captain, Abraham Cock, agreed to make a brief stop at Roanoke Island, giving White just enough time to check on the colonists. It would be nearly 3 years since White had seen his family. When White's ship anchored off Roanoke Island on August 18, 1590, exactly 3 years after Virginia Dare's birth, they immediately noticed something wrong. No smoke rose from cooking fires, no figures moved along the shore. The settlement appeared completely abandoned. White's detailed account of that day, published in Hakluyt's Principal Navigations in 1600, describes a scene of orderly abandonment. The houses had been carefully dismantled, with usable materials removed. Personal possessions had been sorted and packed. This was not the aftermath of a sudden attack or panicked flight. On a wooden post at the entrance to the settlement, White found a single word carved in capital letters: Croatoan. There was no cross above it, which according to their pre-arranged signal meant the colonists had not left under duress. They had departed voluntarily for Croatoan Island, 50 miles to the south. But when White attempted to sail to Croatoan Island, a sudden storm drove his ship out to sea. Captain Cock, concerned about the approaching hurricane season and his privateering schedule, refused to wait for better weather. Despite White's desperate pleas, the ship departed for the Caribbean, leaving the mystery unsolved. John White never saw his family again. He died in Ireland around 1593, having spent his final years writing letters to anyone who would listen, begging for another expedition to find the lost colonists. His last known letter, dated 1602, contains a haunting postscript. He lived in daily torment, not knowing whether his dear daughter still drew breath under heaven or slept beneath foreign earth. The mystery of the lost colony did not die with John White. As English colonization of North America expanded in the early 1600s, numerous expeditions searched for traces of the missing settlers. The newly established Jamestown colony, founded in 1607, made finding the Roanoke colonists one of its primary objectives. Virginia Company records from 1608 describe Captain John Smith's expedition up the Chesapeake Bay, specifically searching for remnants of Raleigh's plantation. Smith's journals mention encountering Native Americans who claimed knowledge of English-speaking people living among inland tribes, but these leads proved frustratingly vague. Between 1608 and 1612, at least 6 different search expeditions combed the coastal region from the Outer Banks to the James River. They found tantalizing clues, pieces of English armor, metal tools of European manufacture, and reports from Native Americans about people with light skin living in remote villages. But no expedition ever found concrete evidence of the colonists themselves. The most promising lead came in 1612 when colonist William Strachey reported meeting Powhatan warriors who described an English settlement on the Chowan River. According to Strachey's account, published in his History of Travail into Virginia Britannia, these warriors claimed to have traded with English families who had been living among the Roanoke tribe for over 20 years. Strachey's report contains specific details that suggest genuine contact with Roanoke survivors. He describes English families who had adapted to Native American agricultural methods, children who spoke both English and Algonquian languages, and adults who served as intermediaries in trade relationships. Most intriguingly, Strachey mentions meeting a woman he believed might be Eleanor White Dare. Croatoan Island, known today as Hatteras Island, has been the focus of archaeological investigation for over a century. The island's location, 50 miles south of Roanoke Island, matches exactly with the destination carved into the post White discovered, but excavations here have yielded more questions than answers. The most significant archaeological work on Hatteras Island began in 1937, under the direction of Dr. J.C. Harrington from the National Park Service. Harrington's team discovered what they believed to be the remains of a 16th-century settlement, including post holes, pottery fragments, and metal objects of European origin. Among the artifacts discovered were brass fittings that matched hardware used in Elizabethan construction, lead shot consistent with firearms carried by the Roanoke colonists, and most intriguingly, a piece of slate bearing what appeared to be English writing. However, the slate was too damaged to yield a complete message. Modern analysis of the Hatteras artifacts has confirmed their European origin and 16th century dating. Metallurgical analysis conducted at the Smithsonian Institution in 1998 determined that several brass objects contained tin ratios characteristic of English manufacturing techniques. This strongly suggests contact with the Roanoke colonists or their possessions. However, excavations led by Dr. Charles Heath from 1995 to 2005 uncovered something puzzling. The European artifacts were found mixed with Native American pottery and tools in patterns that suggested long-term cohabitation rather than temporary refuge. According to Heath's published reports, the evidence pointed to sustained cultural integration spanning decades. In September 1937, tourist Louis Hammond made a discovery that would ignite decades of controversy. While vacationing near the Chowan River in North Carolina, he found a 40-pound stone bearing a carved message that appeared to be from Eleanor White Dare, John White's daughter. The inscription was one of heartbreak and survival. Ananias Dare, Virginia, went hence unto heaven, 1591. Any Englishman show John White, Gover, via. It seemed to indicate that Eleanor's husband Ananias and daughter Virginia had died, while Eleanor herself was still alive as of 1591. The discovery caused a media sensation. Newspapers across the country proclaimed that the mystery of Roanoke had finally been solved. The Smithsonian Institution acquired the stone for study, and initial examinations suggested the carving was consistent with 16th-century English writing styles. As investigations continued, doubts emerged. Journalist Dr. Boyden Sparks uncovered that Hammond had delayed reporting the find, keeping the stone for weeks before notifying historians. Suspicion deepened when, between 1938 and 1941, 42 additional stones appeared across the region, each supposedly telling Eleanor Dare's journey through the wilderness. Modern forensic analysis revealed that most of these Dare stones were fakes. Geological tests showed acid treatments used to create artificial aging, while linguistic studies found word usage and carving techniques inconsistent with the 16th century. The phenomenon was largely an elaborate hoax. Yet the first stone Hammond discovered remains controversial. Advanced testing with electron microscopy and chemical composition has neither confirmed nor disproven its authenticity. It occupies a frustrating space between possibility and deception. It could be genuine, but the weight of evidence leans against it. In 2012, a breakthrough discovery changed the course of research into the lost colony. Archaeologist Dr. Nicholas Lucchetti's team, using ground-penetrating radar near Albemarle Sound, detected buried anomalies consistent with Elizabethan construction. The site, known as Site X, lies 50 miles inland in territory once controlled by the Roanoke tribe. Excavations uncovered pottery fragments, metal objects, and structural remains dating to the late 16th century. Among the most striking finds was a piece of European copper refashioned as a Native American ornament. Chemical analysis traced its composition to known Elizabethan sources, suggesting not just contact but cultural integration. The site also revealed a European-style workshop containing both English and Native American tools. Evidence of metalworking, pottery production, and leather crafting pointed to a relocated community striving for self-sufficiency. Radiocarbon dating confirmed that Site X was occupied between 1587 and 1610, and, most intriguingly, showed continuous habitation for more than 20 years after the colony's disappearance. In 2013, the mystery of the lost colony entered the age of genetic science when Dr. Roberta Estes launched the Lost Colony DNA project. Using advanced genealogical techniques, her team began collecting DNA samples from modern families who claimed descent from the missing colonists. The project faced immediate challenges. 4 centuries of migration, intermarriage, and incomplete records made tracing lineages extremely difficult. Even so, researchers identified several genetic markers that could, in theory, be traced back to specific Roanoke families. According to Dr. Estes's published findings, the evidence strongly suggests that male European colonists fathered children with Native American women, and these mixed ancestry families remained in the region for generations. Yet the DNA raised as many questions as it answered. The patterns do not point to a simple story of cultural assimilation. Instead, they reveal a more complex scenario. Recently declassified documents from the Spanish Colonial Archive in Seville have revealed a dimension of the Roanoke mystery long overlooked. Spanish intelligence reports from the 1580s show that King Philip II's government was well aware of English colonization attempts and had developed specific strategies to counter them. A dispatch dated November 3, 1587, from Spanish Governor Pedro Menendez Marquez to the Council of the Indies described English settlements as a dagger pointed at the heart of our Indies trade. The document detailed plans for eliminating heretical settlements through alliances with hostile native tribes. Spanish naval logs from 1588 record several expeditions to the Carolina coast under Captain Vicente González. Officially described as reconnaissance missions, these voyages occurred during the very years the Roanoke colonists disappeared. González's logs, later translated and published by the South Carolina Historical Society, contain disturbing references to eliminating English presence and securing native cooperation. One entry even mentions Roanoke Island, describing it as abandoned by divine providence. Spanish colonial policy at the time was brutally efficient. Competing European settlements were often destroyed by enlisting local tribes with promises of firearms, metal tools, and protection from rivals. Archaeological excavations at Secatan and Wepemioc village sites have uncovered Spanish coins, crucifixes, and metal implements dating precisely to this period, suggesting that these tribes may have benefited from Spanish contact. In 1998, Freedom of Information requests filed by historian Dr. Lee Miller uncovered a separate and equally disturbing revelation. Classified government documents dating from the 1940s revealed that the federal government conducted extensive archaeological investigations on Roanoke Island during World War II and immediately sealed the results. Reports indicate that during construction of a Coast Guard radar station, military archaeologists discovered what they described as sensitive remains. The Army Corps of Engineers unearthed at least 12 intact skeletons buried in a formal pattern beneath the original settlement site. These remains were swiftly transferred to a classified laboratory at Fort Belvoir, Virginia, for analysis. When portions of the scientific findings were finally declassified in 2003, they contained startling details. The remains clearly showed European ancestry, but isotopic analysis revealed dietary signatures far different from typical 16th century English nutrition. The bones contained evidence of heavy consumption of New World crops such as maize and beans, combined with unusual mineral traces. Those mineral signatures pointed to specific regions deep in the North Carolina interior, hundreds of miles from Roanoke Island. This suggested that the colonists had not simply vanished, but had lived inland for a significant period before their deaths. Throughout centuries of investigation into the lost colony, one crucial source of information has often been overlooked: the oral traditions of Native American tribes who lived in the region during the 16th century. These traditions, passed down through generations, contain detailed accounts of contact with European settlers. The Croatoan, Secatan, Roanoke, and Waipemiok tribes all preserved stories of interactions with European families. These accounts describe not conquest or conflict, but integration and mutual adaptation. According to tribal historians, European families were formally adopted into local communities through established cultural protocols. Archaeological findings support these oral traditions. Excavations at village sites in eastern North Carolina have revealed pottery that blends indigenous craftsmanship with European decorative motifs. Metal tools show modification patterns, suggesting that European craftsmen adapted their work to meet Native American needs. Linguistic evidence adds further weight. Historical research has identified more than 30 English loanwords in Algonquian dialects dating to the late 16th century. Dr. Blair Roods of the University of North Carolina documented these words as appearing during the period immediately following the colony's disappearance. Lumbee tribal traditions, recorded in the 1880s by anthropologist Dr. Hamilton Macmillan, speak of families with English names arriving during what was remembered as the time of the Great Hunger. These families reportedly included women and children, and brought knowledge of farming techniques and metalworking. Modern genealogical research has traced several Lumbee family lines, whose oral traditions claim descent from specific Roanoke colonists. Although DNA evidence has been inconclusive, the genealogies align with names listed in the original passenger manifest. And in recent years, archaeological discoveries have supported the theory that some Roanoke colonists traveled north to the Chesapeake Bay region, just as John White had suggested in his contingency planning. Since 2003, the Chesapeake Archaeological Research Institute has been investigating this possibility. The most promising site lies near the mouth of the James River in territory once controlled by the Paspahegh tribe. Excavations uncovered a European-style structure built using Native American construction methods. Its rectangular layout reflects English design, but the posts were set directly into the earth rather than anchored with stone footings. Carbon dating places the construction between 1585 and 1595. Inside the structure, archaeologists found a striking mixture of artifacts: English coins from 1585 and 1586, alongside traditional Native American pottery, and a brass button from Elizabethan clothing lying near locally made arrowheads. This evidence becomes even more significant when compared to early Jamestown records. When the English founded Jamestown in 1607, they heard persistent reports of Europeans living among nearby tribes. Captain John Smith's maps from 1608 marked several locations where English people were said to reside. But the story turns dark in 1610. Military records from Jamestown show that forces under Captain James Davis attacked Paspahegh villages in the Chesapeake region. Davis's reports mention the discovery of English traitors living as savages. and the execution of several individuals who claimed to be survivors of earlier colonial expeditions. Dr. James Horn's research into early Jamestown records has uncovered disturbing evidence that Virginia Company officials may have deliberately suppressed information about Roanoke survivors. Correspondence from 1609 to 1615 contains repeated references to eliminating confusion about previous colonial attempts and preventing false hopes among potential investors. A letter dated March 12, 1610 from Virginia Company Treasurer Sir Thomas Smith to Governor Lord de la Warr explicitly instructed colonial officials to discourage all inquiry into previous expeditions and to report no intelligence regarding former settlers. The letter suggests that confirming the survival of Roanoke colonists could damage investor confidence in the Jamestown venture. The Virginia Company's fears were understandable. Colonial ventures required massive financial support from private investors and trading companies. If word spread that earlier colonists had survived by abandoning English customs and integrating with Native American communities, it could undermine faith in the colonial project itself. Captain Samuel Argall's expedition reports from 1613 describe systematic searches for irregulars and renegades throughout the Chesapeake region. His forces reportedly captured and interrogated dozens of individuals suspected of being European colonial survivors. However, the results of these interrogations were classified and never made public. The implications are unsettling. Evidence points to the possibility that the Virginia Company deliberately eliminated Roanoke survivors to protect its official narrative. If it became known that colonists had successfully adapted to life with Native American tribes, it would have challenged English claims about the superiority of European civilization. The most significant breakthrough in Roanoke research came in 2015, when the First Colony Foundation, led by archaeologist Dr. Eric Klingelhofer, announced evidence of what they believed to be the actual site of the lost colony. The location was not on Roanoke Island itself, but on nearby Hatteras Island, the very place the colonists had indicated they were going. Using satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and systematic metal detection surveys, the team identified several areas of anomalous activity consistent with a 16th-century European presence. Among the most remarkable finds was a fragment of slate-bearing partial text in Elizabethan English. Though incomplete, the visible letters ELE and DARE strongly suggested a connection to Eleanor White Dare. The slate was dated to approximately 1590 to 1595. Advanced excavation techniques revealed evidence of sustained European habitation at the site for at least 15 years after the colony's disappearance. Soil analysis showed repeated burning patterns consistent with European-style hearths, while pollen studies indicated the cultivation of European crops alongside native plants. Most strikingly, artifacts revealed a blending of cultures, European metal objects modified for Native American use, and traditional pottery decorated with motifs derived from European textiles. The archaeological record points not to conquest or mere survival, but to genuine cultural synthesis. Chapter 16, The Waterside Theatre Discovery, 80 to 8500 PO. In 2018, routine construction work at the Waterside Theatre on Roanoke Island came to an abrupt halt when human remains were unearthed. What began as a parking expansion project turned into one of North Carolina's most significant archaeological discoveries. Dr. Charles Heath, working with the North Carolina Office of State Archaeology, oversaw an emergency excavation of a Devonshire Mal burial ground. The graves revealed a fascinating mixture of traditions, European Christian burial practices combined with Native American customs. Artifacts found alongside the remains reflected this dual heritage, with European metal goods interred alongside traditional tribal items. Forensic analysis showed that many of the individuals were of mixed European and Native American ancestry. Bone chemistry indicated diets that combined European and Native American food sources. Even more remarkable, several skeletons displayed evidence of advanced medical treatment. Skulls showed healed trepanation holes, indicating successful cranial surgery, while other bones bore signs of complex fracture repair, using techniques not documented in European medicine until nearly 2 centuries later. This medical evidence suggests that members of the lost colony community, or their descendants, had developed sophisticated surgical practices by blending European and Native American knowledge. Such innovation implies a stable, enduring community with the time and skill to experiment, learn, and refine new healing methods. The most explosive revelations about the lost colony have come from an unexpected source: classified archives maintained by the Department of Defense since World War II. These files, partially declassified in 2019 after years of legal pressure from historians, suggest that the federal government has known the truth about Roanoke for more than 70 years. The documents reveal that during World War II, military intelligence officers surveying the Atlantic coast uncovered anomalous historical sites across eastern North Carolina. These locations contained clear evidence of sustained European presence dating to the late 16th century. Military archaeologists, working under classified protocols, documented village sites, workshops, burial grounds, and artifacts that demonstrated the Roanoke colonists had not vanished, but had instead formed thriving communities integrated with Native American populations. Why was this information kept secret? The declassified portions of these reports indicate government officials feared the implications for Native American land claims and federal Indian policy. If it could be proven that Roanoke settlers successfully joined tribal societies, questions about sovereignty and treaty rights would grow more complicated. The Lumbee tribe of North Carolina has long asserted descent from the lost colony. Verified archaeological proof of this connection would not only strengthen their case for full federal recognition, but could also affect land ownership throughout the region. Even now, large portions of these military reports remain classified. Officials cite security concerns and protection of cultural resources, but critics believe the real motivation is to avoid the legal and political consequences tied to tribal recognition and territorial rights. After more than 4 centuries of investigation, the evidence points to a complex truth about the lost colony's fate. The colonists did not simply vanish or die. Instead, they accomplished something unprecedented in the history of European colonization. They successfully integrated with Native American society while maintaining their cultural identity. Archaeological discoveries from multiple sites show a sustained European presence throughout eastern North Carolina, from 1587 to at least 1610. Genetic evidence proves that European and Native American populations intermarried and produced children who carried on both cultural traditions. Documentary records, despite government efforts to suppress them, confirm that colonial authorities knew about these surviving communities and worked actively to conceal their existence. What the Roanoke colonists achieved was remarkable. They created the first successful multicultural communities in North American history, developing new technologies, medical techniques, and social structures that combined the best of both European and Native American knowledge. The tragedy of the lost colony is not that it failed, but that its success was deliberately erased from history. The colonists solved the fundamental challenge of European survival in the New World through cooperation and integration. Yet this solution was unacceptable to colonial leaders who needed to maintain myths of European superiority. The true story challenges core assumptions about early American history. It shows that settlement was possible through collaboration rather than conquest, and that cultural integration could bring mutual benefit. Epilogue: questions that remain. Despite centuries of investigation and recent breakthroughs, questions about the lost colony remain unanswered. We may never know the complete story of what happened to every individual colony. We may never fully understand the political decisions that led to the suppression of evidence about their survival. New discoveries, however, continue to emerge. DNA research grows more sophisticated each year. Archaeological techniques reveal evidence long hidden beneath the soil. Tribal oral traditions are finally being documented and preserved by professional historians, giving voice to accounts ignored for generations. The lost colony of Roanoke represents more than a single historical mystery. It represents the complexity of American origins and the danger of accepting official narratives without question. In an age when information can be classified, suppressed, or manipulated, The story of the lost colony reminds us that truth often lies in the spaces between official records. The 115 colonists who disappeared in 1587 may have found something that colonial authorities could not allow to succeed, a different way of building a new world. Their legacy endures, not in the records of failed colonies, but in the DNA of modern families, in artifacts buried in coastal soils, and in the oral traditions of Native American communities who remember when European and indigenous peoples worked together to create something new.